The medieval period lasted about 1,000 years, and during those 1,000 years, people invented ways to kill each other that would make any horror movie look like a kid's show. We are talking boiling, burning, skinning, and things so twisted they sound made up. But every single death on this list actually happened. These are the 20 most brutal deaths in medieval history, and number 1 killed 40 million people. Let's start with number 20, Edward II of England, 1327. So Edward II was King of England for about 20 years, but his wife, Queen Isabella, got tired of him. She teamed up with her boyfriend, Roger Mortimer, raised an army, and took the entire kingdom from him. Edward was thrown into a cell at Berkeley Castle. The guards reportedly kept him in a room above a pit of rotting animal corpses, hoping the smell alone would kill him. It did not. So, according to chronicles written just a few years later, they finished the job with a red-hot iron poker pushed inside his body through a horn so there would be 0 marks on the outside. His screams were heard by villagers outside the castle walls, and that is number 20. We are just getting started. Here comes number 19. Brunhilda of Australia, 613 AD. Brunhilda was a queen who ran large parts of what we now call France for over 30 years. She commanded armies and crushed enemies, one of the most powerful people in Europe, man or woman. But when her rival, King Clair II, finally, music caught her. He wanted the whole world to see what happens when a woman holds too much power. She was tortured for 3 straight days. Then at roughly 70 years old, Brunhilda was tied by her hair, her arms, and her legs to wild horses. The horses were whipped and sent running in different directions. Her body was ripped apart in front of a cheering crowd, and somehow the deaths on this list only get more creative. Let's move to number 18, Ragnar Lothbrok, around 865 AD. Ragnar sits somewhere between real history and Viking legend. The sagas say he raided England and France for years and became the most feared Viking alive. But King Aelle of Northumbria caught him, and Aelle wanted to send a message to every Norseman watching. He threw Ragnar into a pit full of venomous snakes. The sagas say Ragnar did not scream. He laughed, and as the venom spread through his body, he whispered that his sons would come for revenge. They did. His sons raised the great heathen army. Over 3,000 Viking warriors and invaded England in 865 AD. Within 5 years, they controlled most of the country. And what did they do to King Aelle? That one is coming later on this list. Remember that name. Next one is number 17. Fadrique Alonso of Castile, 1358. Peter the Cruel, King of Castile, earned that name the hard way. His own half-brother, Fadrique, came to the royal palace in Seville for a meeting, a peaceful meeting. The moment Fadrique walked through the doors, Peter's bodyguards jumped him with iron maces and heavy clubs. Fadrique pulled his own sword and tried to fight back. But there were too many. They beat him to death on the palace floor while Peter sat and watched. When it was over, Peter reportedly stepped over the body and sat down to eat his dinner. Let's move to number 16, the Massacre at Verden, 782 AD. Charlemagne is called the father of Europe. He built an empire stretching across modern France, Germany, and Italy. But when 4,500 Saxon prisoners refused to convert to Christianity after a rebellion, Charlemagne ordered every single one of them beheaded in one day, 4,500 heads. The royal Frankish music annals recorded it like it was just another Tuesday. Some historians argue the real number might be lower, but even the lowest estimate sits in the thousands. This was not a battle. This was an assembly line of death organized by the man Europe calls its founding father. But wait until you hear what the English did to their own people. Here comes number 15, Simon de Montfort, 1265. Simon, music, de Montfort actually defeated King Henry III of England in battle and ran the country for over a year. But at the Battle of Esham in 1265, the royalists caught up to him. Simon was killed fighting. And then the real horror started. His enemies hacked his body to pieces on the battlefield. They cut off his head, his hands, and his feet. They sent his head as a present to the wife of one of his rivals. His other body parts were nailed up in towns across England so everyone could see what rebellion looks like. Let's move to number 14, Hugh Despenser the Younger, 1326. Hugh Despenser was King Edward II's closest friend and rumored lover. When Queen Isabella seized power, Despenser was the first name on her list. On November 24th, 1326, he was dragged naked through the streets of Hereford while thousands of people threw garbage and rocks at him. Then they brought him to a scaffold built 50 ft tall so the entire city could watch. He was hanged until almost dead, cut down while still breathing, and then in front of the roaring crowd, his private parts were sliced off and thrown into a fire. His stomach was cut open and his guts pulled out and burned while he watched. Only then did they chop off his head and carve his body into 4 pieces. Those pieces were sent to Bristol, York, Dover, and Newcastle. The crowd reportedly treated the whole thing like a party. People brought their children to watch. That was considered normal justice in the 1300s. Next one is number 13. Wat Tyler, 1381. Wat Tyler led 60,000 angry peasants straight into London in 1381. They were furious about a brutal new tax that hit the poorest people the hardest. Tyler met face-to-face with 14-year-old King Richard II at Smithfield to negotiate. Nobody knows exactly what Tyler said during that meeting, but the Lord Mayor of London, William Walworth, pulled out a short sword and music stabbed Tyler in the neck, right there in front of everyone. Tyler collapsed off his horse. His supporters dragged him to a nearby hospital, but the king's men followed. They pulled Tyler out of the hospital, threw him into the dirt, and hacked his head off in the street. That same afternoon, his head was stuck on a spike on London Bridge. When the 60,000 rebels saw their leader's head rotting on a pole, the fight left them. The revolt died with Tyler, and every promise Richard made to the peasants, he broke every single one. Let's move to number 12. William Wallace, 1305. You know, this name from Braveheart. But the movie did not even come close to showing how Wallace really died. On August 23rd, 1305, after being betrayed by a fellow Scotsman, Wallace was stripped naked in London and tied to a horse that dragged him through miles of streets, while crowds threw stones and rotten food at his body. At the execution ground, he was hanged by the neck until he was almost gone, then cut down while still alive. They sliced open his stomach and pulled out his intestines while he, music, was still conscious. They burned his organs in a fire right in front of his face. Then came the axe for his head. After that, they chopped his body into 4 separate pieces. His head was dipped in tar and mounted on a spike on London Bridge. His right arm went to Music Newcastle, his left arm to Berwick, right leg to Stirling, left leg to Perth. King Edward I wanted every corner of Britain to get the message. Fight us and music, we will spread your body across the country. What comes next on this list is even harder to believe. Here comes number 11, John of Strathbogie, Earl of Atholl, 1306. John fought alongside Wallace and Robert the Bruce for Scottish freedom. When the English captured him, King Edward made a very specific point. Because John was a nobleman, his gallows were built 30 ft taller than normal. The height was the message. Let's move to number 10, Gilles de Rais, 1440. This one is different from every other entry on this list. Gilles de Rais was a decorated French military hero who fought beside Joan of Arc. He was rich, powerful, and respected music across all of France. But after Joan was burned at the stake in 1431, something inside him snapped completely. Over the next 8 years, Gilles kidnapped, tortured, music, and murdered between 80 and 200 children from poor farming villages near his estates. The victims were mostly young boys whose families had no money and no power to fight back. At his trial in 1440, music. His confessions were so graphic that the bishop ordered the crucifix in the courtroom covered with a cloth because he said the cross should not have to hear music, what was being described. G was hanged and burned. In front of a crowd that included parents of his victims, he became one of the first documented serial killers in European history and inspired the fairy tale of Bluebeard. Here comes music, number 9. John and Cornelius Dwight, 1672. These 2 brothers, music, were Dutch political leaders. When France invaded the Netherlands in 1672, the public turned on them overnight. An angry mob pulled music Cornelius from prison. John came to save his brother. Big mistake. The mob beat both of them, shot them multiple times. Music. Then stripped their bodies naked and hung them upside down from a wooden scaffold. Then the crowd started cutting pieces off the bodies. And here is the part that sticks with you. Multiple. Eyewitness accounts report music that some people in the crowd cooked and ate pieces of their flesh. This was not the Dark Ages. This was 1672. Let's move to number 8. Emperor Valerian of Rome, 260 AD. Roman Emperor Valerian was captured alive by Persian king Shapur I after the Battle of Edessa. Around 70,000 Roman soldiers were taken prisoner that day. As for Valerian himself, Shapur reportedly used the Roman emperor as a personal foot tool. Every time Shapur mounted his horse, he stepped on Valerian's back. When Valerian finally died after years of humiliation, Shapur had his skin removed, stuffed with straw, painted red, and put on display in a Persian temple. Foreign ambassadors were shown the stuffed emperor as a warning of what happens when you challenge Persia. Next one is number 7. The Blood Eagle performed on King Aya, 867 AD. Remember Ragnar from number 18? Here is what his sons did to the man who threw their father into a snake pit. According to Norse sagas, they performed something called the Blood Eagle, music, on King Aya. They pinned him face down. They took an axe and music hacked open his back along the spine. They pulled his ribs outward so they stuck out like wings. And then, while Ayla was reportedly still alive and breathing, they reached in and pulled his lungs out through the opening. Historians still argue music about whether this actually happened or was just Viking propaganda. But the fact that it showed up in multiple sagas over hundreds of years tells you one thing. The Vikings wanted the entire world to believe they were capable of this, and that fear was the whole point. Let's clear his throat. Move to number 6. George Plantagenet, Duke of Clarence. Music 1478. George was the brother of King Edward I of England. The two spent years, music fighting, and betraying each other until George was finally convicted of treason. The sentence was death. But according to several sources from Music the Time, George got to pick how he went, and he chose to be drowned in a barrel of Malmsey wine, a full barrel, face down. Whether he truly chose this, or whether it was forced on him, music and dressed. Up as a choice, the image of an English prince dying face first in a wine barrel is one of the strangest royal music deaths in all of history. Here, snorts, comes number 5. Jacques de Molay and the Knights. Music, Templar, 1314. On Friday, October 13th, 1307, music, King Philip V of France arrested hundreds of Knights Templar across the country in a single coordinated raid. That date is actually one of the big reasons we consider Friday the 13th unlucky today. Philip owed the Templars music a fortune and decided destroying them was easier than paying them back. Under extreme torture, many Templars confessed to crimes they never committed. Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master, initially confessed too. But on March 18th, 1314, standing in front of the flames that would kill him, de Molay took back every word. He shouted to the crowd that he was innocent, and the Templars were pure. Philip ordered the fire set low to make the burning last as long as possible. From inside the flames, de Molay reportedly cursed both, King Philip and Pope Clement V, calling them to join him before God within 1 year. Pope Clement died 33 days later. King Philip died 8 months after that. Next music one is number 4. Medieval fleeing practiced across Europe and Asia. Fleeing means removing a person's music skin while they are still alive. And this was not random cruelty. It was an official legal punishment used by the Mongol Empire, the music Aztecs, and several European kingdoms. Executioners would start music at the face and work downward. Most victims went into shock before they reached the chest. In some cases, the finished skins were stuffed music with straw and hung on city walls. In others, they were nailed to church doors as a public music warning. The fact that governments signed off on this as an acceptable punishment tells you everything about how different the concept of music justice was 700 years ago. Let's move to number 3. Piers Gaveston, 1312. Piers Gaveston was music, the closest companion of King Edward II. The English barons hated Gaveston for having too much influence over the king. When a group of barons led by the Earl of Warwick finally captured him, they did not just kill him. They ran swords through his body music first, then cut his head clean off and left his corpse rotting on the side of a road music for weeks. No burial, no prayers, nothing. A group of Dominican friars eventually music picked up what was left and gave him a quiet funeral. Gaveston's death music was a direct threat aimed straight at the king. It said, "We can take anyone you love, and there is nothing you can do about it." Edward Never music recovered from losing Gaveston, and his reign fell apart piece by piece after that. The same Edward who music ended up dying at Berkeley Castle. Number 20 on this list. See how one death leads to the next. That is medieval. Music politics. A chain of blood that never stops. Next one is music, number 2. Hanged, drawn, and quartered at Tyburn. Tyburn was a killing ground just outside London. For over 500 years, from the 1200s to the 1700s, hundreds of men were executed music here using the worst method England ever invented. The process never changed. First, they dragged you behind a horse through the streets, music to the execution.